Let's talk about one of the primary themes of the pandemic period, that is the boom in e-commerce and where it goes when things get back to normal. Joining us from Adobe, Taylor Schreiner is Director of Digital Insights. Taylor, welcome to the show. I want to look firstly, we've got a lot of charts here, and I want to move through them because there's some really good stuff. First, give us the numbers. What exactly happened during the last 12 months and how big was it compared to history?
Well, as you know, Oliver, we've spoken before. We use data from Adobe Analytics across trillion or more interactions across hundreds of millions of products, thousands of retailers to assess the state of the overall U.S. digital economy. And what we saw this year was completely unprecedented. We saw what fundamentally amounts to a fast forward of 2 years in e-commerce, moving from sales that we saw in 2019 to sales we would not have expected until maybe 2023. So it's been a massive boost, and we don't see any sign of that slowing down as we go into March.
So to $844 billion between March 2020 and Feb 2021. And the average before that, I'm looking at a chart here that shows the average holiday spend, I believe that is just online prior to this was like, what, 70 billion?
So this year's online holiday season was about $188 billion. So the $183 billion that we saw incremental last year was equivalent to everybody doing all their holiday shopping last year and then going back and doing it all one more time for 2 months. So it's huge.
Wow. Okay. Now, how do we assess this going forward? I mean, obviously, nobody can predict the future, but if we go at this same rate, where does that get us?
So at the moment, we're sitting on a U.S. retail world that's roughly the size of the economy of Holland, right? And so if we look forward a year or two, we're expecting, based on the data that we have, that 2023 could be our first $1 trillion year in online retail in the U.S. alone. And that is obviously a massive number and a sign of the enormous shift in consumer behavior that's occurred over the past 12 months.
So if we go at this pace, which is what, a 20% boost to incremental growth, if that maintains, then we get to close to $1 trillion within the next 18 months, or basically, well, 2022?
2022. Yeah, I don't think we need to stay necessarily at the 20% mark. We can go back to relatively normal levels of year-over-year incrementality, which is sort of anywhere between 12 and 16 or 17%. 20% will definitely get us there. What we don't see necessarily the 30, 34, 40% growth rates that we've seen in the past. We don't expect that to sustain, but we do expect that we will go back to normal levels of percentage growth, which means we've basically gotten a rocket boost of 2 years, and we're just going to keep riding it going forward.
All right, so here's your guys' projection, 2022, first $1 trillion for e-commerce. Pretty amazing. Now, in terms of what this means for the supply chain, you guys have a pretty interesting way of looking at this. You are tracking the number of out-of-stock messages that people are getting on sites. How are you doing that? This is pretty interesting. It looks like there's a lot of stuff that's out of stock.
Absolutely. So we look at out-of-stock experiences for consumers. So we look at it from the consumer perspective and what they're seeing when they go to a page and they look and see, hey, I want to buy anything from my DSLR camera to my treadmill to my now can of soup. And as you can see from the chart, we had seen a relatively moderate growth in out-of-stock behaviors or out-of-stock events over the course of 2019. As soon as the pandemic hit, we saw a spike in that, as we would expect, as everyone moved online and supply chains were affected. That started to come down as we went into the holiday season. What's been surprising over the past few months is that has continued to actually rise. And we see two reasons for that. One is continued supply chain challenges upstream, especially in electronics. And the other is that fundamentally, the digital economy of 2021 is radically different than the digital economy of 2019. And some of those shopping behaviors are people going to buy soup or broccoli. And so it's a different out-of-stock experience as well. So part of it is just that people have changed their behavior and are willing to tolerate more out-of-stocks for staple goods. And some of it is that there still seem to be supply chain challenges, at least from the consumer's perspective.
Okay. Taylor, one more you got for us, the cost of shopping. So maybe this will contribute also to some of the costs, but overall, the digital purchasing power has actually decreased by 1% over the past year.
Yeah, that was a very surprising data point for us. As you can see from the chart, basically every year since 2014, we've seen the dollars spent online gain about 4% in purchasing power year over year over year. And what happened as COVID hit is suddenly that flattened out and began to decline. And again, it has to do with two factors. One is the prices of electronics and computers have flattened out. You're basically getting similar products for similar prices as you did 12 months ago. At the same time, people are adding to their basket more groceries, more furniture, more apparel, more things that are not as affected by innovation and don't push prices down as quickly. And this is something we're keeping an eye on very closely because, as you know, it's part of the reason that we think we've been seeing lower inflation over the past several years is that the online marketplace has been keeping prices low. And if that starts to shift, it has implications for all of us.
Okay. Taylor, very interesting. I really like the nugget there at the end as purchasing power has decreased and some of the supply constraints are showing up with out-of-stock items. Couple of pieces of information there that any inflationistas listening to will certainly latch on to. Taylor, thanks for the details.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. Taylor Schreiner is the Director of Digital Insights at Adobe with some great charts here over the past year and the way e-commerce has been reshaped by the pandemic.